Hello, and welcome to another episode of Law and Sarasota. I'm your host, Adam Tebrugge. A lot of students in Sarasota County are contemplating going to law school, and that's why I'm very delighted to have a special guest on the program today. Jeff Martlew, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Adam. Good to be here.
Jeff is Dean of the Tampa Bay campus of the Thomas Cooley Law School. And prior to assuming that position, why don't you tell us a little bit about your legal education?
Well, I'm a graduate of Cooley Law School. I'm a member of Cooley's second graduating class. Cooley was founded in Lansing, Michigan in 1972, and I started attending in September of 1973, graduated in 1976, and so my connection with Cooley goes back almost to the beginning. I remember when it was a tiny little building with 2 classrooms and about 100 students, and now we're the largest law school in the United States with 5 campuses and 2,200 students in the states of Michigan and Florida.
And I want to talk more about Thomas Cooley Law School, but before we do that, tell us a little bit about your legal career prior to joining the school as a dean.
Okay, well, as I said, I graduated from Cooley in 1976, was licensed to practice law in Michigan, and spent a couple of years as an associate in a small law firm before striking off on my own, and I formed a partnership with another guy, and he and I were in general practice together for 6 years. Then I was elected to the district court bench in Michigan, which would be equivalent to the county court here in Florida. I spent 8 years as a district judge, then was elected to the circuit court bench, which would be equivalent to the circuit court here in Florida, and spent 14 plus years as a circuit judge before I left the bench to start teaching full-time at Cooley.
Tell us a little bit about what kind of cases you heard when you served as a judge in Michigan.
Well, the district court in Michigan, like the county court in Florida, is kind of the people's court. It deals with the traffic cases, the small civil cases, landlord-tenant cases, those types of things. I thought of it as assembly line justice. You're dealing with the cases that most people that go to court are going to end up in the district court for one of those reasons. And my primary job as a judge, aside from listening to the cases and making the right decision, was to push them through the system as quickly as possible, because I was the only judge in a very busy district. As a circuit judge, the pace is a lot more relaxed because you're dealing with more complex cases, and the litigation takes a lot longer. So in circuit court, I deal with major felony cases, anything from strong armed robbery up to murder cases, that type of thing. Major civil cases in Michigan, the jurisdiction was that any civil case over $25,000 in value was heard in the circuit court. Then all the domestic cases, child divorce, child custody, child support, equitable actions, land condemnation cases. It is the general jurisdiction court in Michigan, just like it is in Florida.
So Jeff, you had a good legal career, you had a great judicial career, and then you moved into legal education. Tell us how your relationship with Thomas Cooley developed.
Well, it's kind of funny. One of the things I've learned in life is that if you get up in the morning, interesting things will happen. And I guess part of life is taking a look at the opportunities that are presented to you. After I'd been on the circuit court bench for about a dozen years, during that time when I was a circuit judge, I also served on Cooley's board of directors, and was on the board for about 12 years, and kind of gained an interest in teaching while I was on the board. In fact, interestingly, my undergraduate degree was in secondary education, and one of the reasons I went to law school was because there weren't any teaching jobs available at the time in Michigan, or there weren't very many, and I took the LSAT on a lark and did pretty good on it, so I decided to go to law school. But anyhow, I was still on the bench and started teaching as an adjunct professor at Cooley in the skills department. Found out that I really enjoyed teaching, enjoyed working with the students, and after I'd been doing that for a couple of years, an opportunity came along to take a full-time position at the law school. And so I walked out of the courthouse on April 30th, and I started at Cooley on May 1st, and ended up as a full-time professor in the skills department, never dreaming that I'd end up in Florida 4 years later.
When you say the skills department, what are you referring to?
Trial skills, pretrial skills, appellate practice, cases like that where you're taught to develop the skills that a lawyer has to have, especially if you're practicing in court. One of the things Cooley prides itself on is that we place a major emphasis on teaching practical legal skills. We think that lawyers should not only understand legal theory, but they should know how to practice law. And so we place a real emphasis at Cooley on teaching our students what you have to do in a courtroom and what you have to do to prepare to be in the courtroom to be successful. And that's the department I was teaching in.
Well, Jeff, as you mentioned, Thomas Cooley Law School began in the state of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you spent your career. How did Thomas Cooley end up in Riverview, Florida?
Kind of an interesting story. As I mentioned, we started out as a small law school in Lansing, Michigan, which is the state capital. And from the very beginning, part of Cooley's strategic plan was to be big. We're a private, non-profit institution. A lot of people think that Cooley is a for-profit corporation like University of Phoenix or something. It's not. It's a non-profit school. And so all of the tuition money gets poured right back into the school. And because it's a non-profit school, not affiliated with a state university, it's largely dependent upon tuition dollars in order to fund the program. Well, the founder of the law school, Thomas Brennan, realized from the very beginning that in order to offer a broad program of legal education, it was going to have to be funded by tuition dollars, and the only way to do that is to have a lot of tuition dollars. The only way to do that is to have a lot of students. So our strategic plan, among other things, has always been to be big. What we found as the school developed over the first 20, 30 years is that we drew a lot of students from the southeastern United States and from the state of Florida in particular. Before we ever came to Florida, about 7% of our students came from the state of Florida. About 7% of our alumni ended up in the state of Florida, and that's more than any state except Michigan. We had, before we opened the doors in Riverview, over 900 alumni practicing law in the state of Florida. And so when we were looking at expanding a few years ago, Florida was kind of a natural place for us to go because we were already pretty popular here. The other thing we found over the years is that those students that came up to Michigan from Florida hated Michigan winters. And if they got an opportunity to transfer to a school down in Florida rather than graduate from Cooley, a lot of them would transfer back down here. And we were fighting a battle with non-academic attrition. And so we decided, okay, let's go where the market is. And Tampa was kind of a natural area for us because in the geographic area surrounding Tampa Bay, there's a population of over 4 million. There was only one law school here. In addition to being the largest law school in the country, we're the largest part-time provider of part-time legal education in the country. And there are a lot of working people down here that we typically draw that market as students. So we felt that the Tampa area would be a good location for us. And we picked Riverview because the location there is right off the intersection of I-75 and 301, so it's a campus that's easy for commuters to get to.
Just south of the city of Tampa is your campus, and I've had the opportunity to visit you there, and you've really done a tremendous job building a law school campus in a short period of time. Let's talk a little bit about the campus and some of the amenities that you have to offer.
Okay. Well, we are proud of that campus, and I think one of the reasons that it's such a good campus is that we've been through this before. I mentioned that Cooley started as one tiny little school in Lansing, Michigan, and that's still where the primary campus is, but the Riverview campus is actually the 4th branch campus we've opened. We have branch campuses in Ann Arbor, Auburn Hills, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so this is the 4th time we've rolled out a branch campus, and having done it before gave us a lot of experience of what you need to do, what you should avoid, that type of thing. The campus here is a 132,000 square foot building that has 22 classrooms, an ABA quality law library, large lecture halls, an appellate courtroom, a trial courtroom. For all intents and purposes, it's a standalone law school. Cooley is not 5 different law schools. It's one law school with 5 campuses, but every one of our campuses is capable of providing the entire legal education. And so students at this campus are able to get their complete JD education just with the classes that are offered at the Tampa Bay campus. The curriculum is the same at every campus. We're one school with one administration, one curriculum, one faculty, but we offer the full program at all 5 campuses.
You know, the legal profession has really changed in the last 10 or 15 years due to the influence of technology. And one thing I was very impressed with at your campus in Riverview is how you've incorporated technological advances into your classrooms and into your courtrooms. Tell us a little bit about some of the technology that's available.
Well, you're right, we have done that, and that's because you have to keep up with the times. When you and I started practicing law, computers were probably the size of a regular room. I know that I was in my mid-40s before I ever had a computer in my office. We took notes on legal pads, and we read the law by going in the library and reading big textbooks and that type of thing. Well, technology has completely changed our life. We're now teaching a generation that has never known life without computers. And the reality is it's taken over our lives as far as the way we function in society. And that's happening in the court system like it is every place else. So our campus is completely Wi-Fi. Every seat in every classroom in the library is wired because the students all bring their laptops to class. They do most of their research on computers by looking up cases on Westlaw and Lexis. And we've incorporated into the courtrooms modern technology because in the old days, if you wanted to introduce an exhibit as in a trial, for example, you physically brought it into the courtroom. Now you take a picture of it, you put it on your flash drive, you pop it up on your laptop, and it shows on the screen. That's what's happening in the world. And so we've built that technology into our campuses because that's the way lawyers are going to be introducing exhibits in court.
So when did the campus in Riverview open? And talk to us a little bit about your introductory class of students and the student body that you have there now.
Sure. We opened for classes in May 2012, and the game plan here was to roll this campus out over a 3-year period. Basically, as the first group of students advances from one semester to the next, we add the classes and the curriculum we need to keep them on track so that they can graduate on time. Most of the faculty that are currently at the Riverview campus came down from the state of Michigan. We've hired some local faculty here, and we're continuing to do that as we roll the program out. But basically, one of the things that makes Cooley different from most law schools is we run a regular year-round program. We admit students 3 times a year in January, May, and September. We graduate them 3 times a year in January, May, and September. Our summer program's not a short semester, it's a regular 15-week semester. And so most of our students go to school year-round, and that allows them to take fewer credits per semester, but they can still graduate in 3 years, which is the traditional law school track if you want to. They're just doing it in 9 semesters instead of 6. We also have a regular 4-year program. We have a regular 5-year program. We offer the traditional 2-year or 3-year program where you've got the summers off if you want to do it. And it doesn't matter whether you're a day student or a night student, all of those scheduling options are available to you. So there's a great deal of flexibility built into the program, and that's part of what has made us so big because our scheduling options are more varied than you find anything else. You can speed up, you can slow down, you can go during the day, during the night, move back and forth, whatever you want to do pretty much. We give students that ability. The first class that came in May 2012 was a night class. The average age of that group was 31. Our youngest student was 22. Our oldest was 62. And that's one of the things about, nice things about the January and the May classes. They tend to be older students who have been out of college for a while, have some real life experience. They're coming back because it's a second career, or it's something they've always wanted to do. Most of them are working at least part-time or raising a family. And it's our flexibility that gives them the ability to go to law school. Our September classes are usually the biggest classes. Those are the more traditional students that are coming in right out of undergrad, and they're moving right on to law school. But there's some mix of older students in those classes too.
I think that flexibility is really important. As you mentioned, there's a lot of people who need to continue to work while they pursue their legal education. Mm-hmm. And a legal education is also something that is available to the older student who can come back after many years. But also, I think there's the ability to serve the more underserved portions of our society who have not traditionally had legal education open to them. Let's talk about that for a moment, because here in Sarasota County, we're very interested in improving the diversity of the legal profession.
Right. I was reading an article the other day that indicated that today in American society, the average number of African American law school grads is 7% of the graduating classes, which kind of surprised me. I knew it was low, but I didn't know it was that low, because at Cooley, at least at the Tampa Bay campus, we've got a 42% minority rate. The law touches everything going on in our society. That's one of the things that makes it such an interesting career. And I think it's important, those of us at Cooley think it's important, that the makeup of lawyers ought to reflect the makeup of our society. And let's face it, we're a vastly changing society. We're still predominantly white Anglo-Saxon Protestant in the United States, but that's probably going to change in our lifetime, your and my lifetime. It's changing really quickly. And so at Cooley, because of our enrollment philosophy, we've always attracted a lot of minority candidates, and because of our flexible scheduling, that type of thing, that creates options for people that a lot of traditional law schools prohibit. You can't stop your life for 3 years while you're going to law school. And let's face it, you and I know law school is extremely demanding. And especially if you're going full time, you don't have much time for anything else except sleep. Well, for somebody that can't fit into that lifestyle for 3 years, unless you find another school that gives you the option to work part-time and go to school part-time, you're prohibited from a law school career. So that's been one of the unintended consequences of our philosophy. In addition to being the largest law school in the country for minority, or for total enrollment, we're the largest law school in the country for minority enrollment, and we're the largest law school in the country for providing part-time education. The ABA classifies anyone taking less than 13 credit hours a semester as a part-time law student. Well, because of our year-round program, most of our students are taking 9 to 12 credit hours a term, so they're classified as part-time.
You know, something you mentioned earlier I think was important, and that is that at Thomas Cooley Law School, there's a lot of focus on practical skills. How is that accomplished, and what makes that different from the traditional legal education?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. The traditional legal education, I think, focuses a lot on the theory of the law. And a lot of law schools look for professors who will sit and think about theory and write and publish a lot of articles about this is the way life ought to be and that type of thing. And they're academians who don't have very much law practice experience. I'm not being critical of that. That's just a different philosophy in providing legal education. But the philosophy at Cooley has always been that lawyers ought to know how to practice law. And so from the very beginning as an institution, we focused on teaching practical skills That doesn't mean we ignore theory, but theory is more presented in the core courses that you have to take, like contracts, torts, criminal law, and so forth. And then we place a heavy emphasis on skills classes as the students get into electives. The way we do that is the vast majority of our, number one, the vast majority of our faculty are not pure academians. They're people who have been hired because they've been out in the real world practicing law as a prosecutor or a public defender or a judge or an attorney who writes wills or whatever it is for 10, 12, 15 years, and they've got a lot of practical experience in that field that they're able to transmit into the classroom. The second way we do that is we place a strong emphasis on teaching practical skills. So we offer classes, like I said, in trial skills, pretrial skills, advanced writing courses, advanced family court practice, advanced tax practice. The list goes on and on and on about skills classes we offer that students are able to select as a elective course in their last year or so of law school and really get good at the field that they're interested in practicing when they graduate. Then the third thing we require is that, and this is unique, with a lot of law, not very many law schools do this, we require our students as a condition of graduation to have a semester of clinical practice. And so they can do that one of two ways. They either spend a semester working in one of our in-house clinics. Across the 5 campuses, we have 12 clinics that vary from anything from doing elder law to criminal defense to we've opened a debt collection clinic or a debt relief clinic in Riverview, for example. Wide variety of things they can do for the clinical experience. The other alternative would be to spend a semester working in what we call our externship program, which is kind of like an internship, is the term you hear most places. We call it an externship, E-X-T-E-R-N. And in that situation, the student would actually be clerking for a judge, working in a law firm, working in the trust department of a bank, working for the public defender or the state attorney, whatever area it is they're interested in. They get for lack of a better term, a job working under the supervision of a licensed attorney, and instead of getting paid for it, they're paying tuition and earning credit towards their law degree for doing it. They're required to do that as part of the educational program at Cooley. So that's how we're teaching practical skills.
Jeff, there's a lot of students who watch this program, and if there are students out there who are thinking about going to law school, what are some of the things they should think about as they go through college, or what can they do to better prepare themselves to be successful at law school?
Okay. You know, Adam, the biggest problem we find with students coming in the door right now is lack of critical reading and writing skills. Back when you and I were in public school, the public schools really emphasized writing skills, reading and analysis and that type of thing, and they don't do that as much as they used to. And because of that, students are graduating from undergrad and they can't put a decent paragraph together that is grammatically correct and makes sense. Well, the importance of that is when you're arguing a case in court, you've got to be able to persuade a judge or a jury in an articulate fashion that the position you're advocating on behalf of your client makes sense. And if you're doing that in the form of motion practice, for example, then you've got a judge who's reading a brief, and he or she probably has 6 or 7 briefs to read that night. And the reality is you've got about 3 minutes to catch the attention of that judge. And if you don't do it in that amount of time, then the judge is going to put that brief aside and go on to the next one. I'm telling you from practical experience, that's the way it used to be when I was on the bench.
Sure.
You better get my attention real quick and get to the point, and you better do it in a way that makes sense. That's the reality of practicing law. So any class that helps a student's ability to write cognate, sensible sentences is going to help. Reading skills are very important. Ability to analyze is very important. Those are the things I'd really that are available to everybody that I'd suggest you concentrate on. Beyond that, classes in accounting, economics, political science, those traditional types of things that lawyers have to think about form a good basis.
I agree with you wholeheartedly that writing skills are essential to succeeding in law school and succeeding as an attorney. Jeff, we have just a couple of minutes left here. Right now, there's some feeling that maybe legal education isn't the way to go, that the market is oversaturated. What would you say to people who raise that issue?
Well, first of all, I'd say that the legal education is not the way to go for everybody. One of the things that strikes me as funny if you live long enough, you learn to appreciate the ironies of life. And I mentioned before, I went to law school in part because there weren't many teaching jobs available. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and really went to law school on kind of a lark because I did well on the LSAT. You can't afford to do that anymore. I was able to pay my way through law school, and I didn't walk out with a huge amount of debt. These days, all education, including law school, is much, much more expensive. A lot of students are financing their education, and they have a huge debt load when they graduate. So what I tell prospective students is, if you're thinking about a law degree because you don't know what you want to do with your life, don't go to law school. It's too expensive, and the work is too hard. Go get a master's degree or something, or go out and work for a couple of years until you figure out what you want to do. But if you really want to be a lawyer, go to law school, and I think the opportunity is there. You know, I graduated from law school in 1976, and back then they were saying there's too many lawyers. We don't need any more lawyers. We don't need any more law schools. That's something that you're just always going to hear. But the reality is, our society is made up of laws. The law intersects with everything we do in life, and that's what makes it so interesting, because it controls everything from how fast you drive your car, to what's the quality of the food you're buying, to everything else.
Right.
And so if you're interested in that, do it. Opportunity is there. There's always going to be divorce. There's always going to be crime. There's always going to be government regulation. That's what lawyers deal with.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the program and letting Sarasota and Manatee counties know about the Thomas Cooley Law School. And thank you for watching another episode of Law and Sarasota.